You know, for almost a decade, there's been this ghost story haunting the internet. It's a tale of a lost, horrifyingly violent anime that's eaten up thousands of hours, kicked off endless debates, and totally blurred the lines between what's real and what's just a story. We're talking about the hunt for Saki Sanobashi, a digital mystery that has absolutely consumed people for over 8 years. So where does a story like this even begin? Well, like a lot of these internet legends, it all starts on 4chan. It was February 21st, 2015, and on the Exiles board, that's the forum for all things paranormal and creepy, a user asked a pretty simple question. What's the most messed up thing you've ever seen on the deep web? And the replies, they were exactly what you'd expect, just a whole catalog of digital nightmares. But one anonymous post, it really stood out. It wasn't just shocking, it was specific, detailed, and completely haunting. I mean, the description was chillingly precise. This user talked about a 30-minute anime, said it looked like it was from the 80s, Japanese with English subtitles. They described this philosophical debate that just spirals into madness, starvation, and incredibly graphic suicide. And that right there, that single anonymous comment, it planted a seed that would grow into one of the most obsessive lost media hunts the internet has ever seen. And pretty soon, this supposed anime got a name that would stick: Saki Sanobashi. Funnily enough, the translation has absolutely nothing to do with the original title, GoForAPunch, but with a name, the legend was now official. It wasn't just some creepy story anymore, it was a target. It was a piece of lost media just waiting to be found. The original poster, the OP, didn't stop there. They dropped even more details that basically became the Bible for all the searchers. Get this, 9 girls in total. 8 of them looked pretty similar, but one had this distinct, almost white Heim-cut hairstyle. And there was no music, just this deeply unsettling ambient sound and a scream that they compared to the soundtrack from The Shining. These weren't just descriptions anymore, they were clues. The case file was officially open. You know, most stories on 4chan, they just disappear, right? They fade into obscurity. But not this one. No, this one did the exact opposite. It absolutely exploded. Whole communities on Reddit, on Discord, and right back on 4chan dedicated themselves to finding Saki. The story was just too compelling, too specific to be completely made up. Or was it? We're talking about a search that has now raged on for over 8 years. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. Thousands of people working together from all over the world, chasing a ghost based on a single anonymous forum post. I mean, it's an incredible testament to the power of a good mystery and the almost fanatical dedication of online communities. Now, here's where things get really, really weird. The story started to create its own memories. People started popping up, sharing these fragmented recollections that seemed to line up with the original post. This testimony from a Reddit user, for example, it's different in the details, but it just added more fuel to the fire. Was this person remembering the same anime? Or was this a case of our collective memory just being tricked by suggestion? The line was already getting pretty blurry. So you gotta ask, why this story? What made it stick? Well, it was like a perfect storm of factors. First off, you've got the obvious morbid curiosity. Then the whole deep web origin story gave it this aura of danger, like it was forbidden knowledge. And crucially, it was plausible. The 1980s was a wild west for anime, full of violent, experimental OVAs that were barely documented. It was the perfect recipe for a modern myth, a story that felt both totally impossible and completely believable at the exact same time. So, with thousands of amateur internet sleuths on the case, the community began this huge forensic deep dive into the darkest corners of the internet. They were hunting for any trace, anything at all, of this elusive anime. The hunt was officially on, and it was exhaustive. What followed was just this relentless cycle of getting your hopes up and then getting them crushed. Animes with similar themes were tracked down, investigated, and then rolled out, one by one. YouTubers picked up the story, which brought in tons of new searchers, but also a lot more trolls. For every promising lead that surfaced, there were a dozen dead ends. The whole search was becoming this maddening loop of hope and disappointment. Let me give you a perfect example of this cycle. The manga Dragon Head. It totally had that same vibe of despair and survival horror. A tweet even connected it to the search, which got everyone really excited. But when people actually dug into it, they hit a brick wall. Dragon Head never got an anime adaptation back then. So, another promising lead, another complete dead end. And that really sums up the frustrating reality of this whole thing. And what's kind of brilliant is that the hunt for Saki did manage to unearth other genuinely lost or super obscure media. But the main target, it stayed completely invisible. Saki was still just a ghost in the machine. After 4 years of hitting nothing but dead ends and false leads, the community was just drained. It really felt like this thing was never going to be solved. And then, in December of 2019, it seemed like the truth was finally coming out, and from the one person who could end it all, the original poster. This was it. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The final answer. The end of the search. Or was it? A Reddit user going by Saki Sanobashi OP dropped a bombshell. They posted a full confession claiming they were the person who wrote that 4chan post way back in 2015. They said it was all a joke, a 5-minute troll post they never ever expected anyone to take seriously. They even posted screenshots as proof. It seemed totally definitive. Case closed, right? The mystery was solved. Yeah, no so fast. Because instead of killing the legend, that confession just made the community even more suspicious. See, they had spent years sharpening their investigative skills, and now they turned all of those skills on the confessor. The story, it seemed, was very far from over. The community just ripped this confession to shreds. People were like, wait a minute, why would some casual troll save screenshots for 5 whole years? They pointed out that the original 4chan posts came from an iPhone, but the confessor's proof was clearly from an Android. And the most damning piece of evidence, that screen from The Shining, the audio file wasn't just lying around the internet in 2015. It was part of an obscure paid sound library. The confessor's whole story just didn't add up. And so the confession was pretty much thrown out. The legend of Saki Sanobashi had become too powerful, it was too ingrained in the community's identity. It was more than just a story now, it was a belief. And to them, this was just another liar trying to take credit for something that had grown far, far beyond a simple internet post. The search had to continue. And this, right here, is where the story takes its most fascinating turn. Because what happens when the thing you're searching for is impossible to find? Something else happens. The search itself becomes the whole point. If the anime couldn't be found, well, the community decided they would just create it themselves. The legend has been brought to life in so many ways. Fans have made their own animated shorts and live-action films, all trying to capture the nightmare fuel of that original post. Indie developers have built video games based on the premise. The Japanese idol group Necronomidol even made a Saki-inspired music video. The community wasn't just searching for Saki anymore. They were actively building its world, giving a ghost a real, tangible form. And with all this creative energy, the story itself started to evolve. It wasn't just a lost anime anymore. Oh no, it became a creepypasta. It became a cursed object. Fictional stories started popping up, warning people that watching Saki Sanobashi would trap the viewer in their own inescapable room. The myth had grown its own mythology, and the story became way more important than the search ever was. So in the end, it almost doesn't even matter if Saki Sanobashi was ever real. Through years of searching and debating and creating, it has become real. It exists now as this powerful testament to the internet's ability to create modern folklore. It reflects our own fascination with the unknown, and it leaves us with one big question. What is it about these dark, hidden corners of our world that pulls us in so irresistibly? And what will we create the next time we can't find what we're looking for?